They said the school was empty, but someone or something was still walking the halls. The hallways of Lincoln High were silent in a way that made the air feel heavy, like it was holding its breath. It was nearly midnight, and the glow from the flickering fluorescent lights overhead painted long, uneven shadows on the lockers. The night janitor, Mr. Harlan, had always believed that empty schools were harmless. Tonight he would learn he was wrong. A low thud echoed somewhere in the distance. He froze, broom in hand, straining to hear over the pounding of his own heart. The sound repeated, slow, deliberate, and impossibly close. There was no one there, at least no one visible. And yet, the feeling of being watched crawled over him, inch by inch, cold and relentless. In the library, rows of books stood like silent sentinels, their spines lined neatly, oblivious to the terror creeping closer. Mr. Harlan stepped carefully between the shelves, his flashlight casting narrow beams that cut through the dark. That's when he saw it. A shadow, faceless, standing perfectly still at the end of the aisle. Not moving, not breathing, but he knew it was looking at him. The light flickered. The shadow was gone. Panic clawed at his chest as he turned, convinced he'd find a trick of the light. But the whispers started then. Soft, unintelligible, echoing off the walls. The sound was not human, but it mimicked it. Go, leave. He ran, but the hallways twisted differently now, as if the school itself had shifted while he wasn't looking. Every turn led to the same place. The shadow, always there, waiting, watching. By the time he reached the main doors, he knew the truth. Lincoln High wasn't empty, and whatever haunted it, it wasn't going to let him leave alive. The next morning, the school was buzzing with the usual chaos of students, lockers slamming, and chatter bouncing off the walls. But for Mr. Harlan, sleep had been impossible. Every time his eyes closed, he saw the faceless figure in the hallways, its presence frozen in his mind like a photograph of fear. It started small. A door left slightly ajar that should have been locked, papers on the floor rearranged in patterns he didn't recognize, the faint sound of footsteps echoing in empty corridors. No one else noticed. How could they? To everyone else, Lincoln High looked normal, perfectly ordinary. By mid-morning, a group of students discovered a classroom door that wouldn't open. The paint on the frame was chipped, and the rusty lock was bent as though someone, or something, had forced it. Curious, the students called the janitor, and Mr. Harlan reluctantly agreed to take a look. The door groaned as he pulled it open, revealing a classroom frozen in time. Desks were stacked neatly, textbooks arranged in perfect piles. But the air smelled wrong. Metallic, like iron and old blood. A chalkboard marker scrawled an unsettling message in a shaky hand. I see you. Mr. Harlan's flashlight flickered across the room. At the back, the faceless figure stood, its body unnaturally still. He blinked, and it was gone. Yet the feeling remained, as if the walls themselves were watching. He tried to leave, but the door slammed shut behind him. Panic surged, and his hands pounded against the wood. The lock clicked on its own. Something was inside with him. A whisper, soft and distant, began, "Why are you here?" The lights flickered violently, and in that instant, the figure reappeared, closer than before. This time he could feel its gaze, not on his eyes, but through them. The fear wasn't just in his mind. It pressed into his chest, heavy and suffocating. Desperate, Mr. Harlan yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. But the corridors had changed again. Desks lined the hallway, lockers stacked like walls. The faceless figure was everywhere, appearing and vanishing with impossible speed. Every turn, every hallway, every stairwell led back to it. He tried to call for help, but his phone showed nothing but static. No signal, no calls. The school had become a labyrinth, and the faceless entity had learned every corner, every shadow. By evening, the rumor had spread among students. The janitor had vanished. But those who saw him last described the same chilling scene. A man running through the hallways, shouting into emptiness, chased by nothing, yet clearly terrified of something no one else could see. And somewhere, in the bowels of Lincoln High, The faceless figure waited, patient and unblinking. The next week, Lincoln High became a nightmare no one could explain. Students whispered about strange sightings in empty classrooms, lockers that opened to reveal nothing but shadows, and the feeling that someone or something was always behind them. It started with small disappearances. First, a freshman named Emily didn't show up for her history class. Teachers assumed she was sick, but by the end of the day, she hadn't answered calls or texts. Then another student, Marcus, vanished from the cafeteria during lunch. There were no signs of a struggle, no clues, nothing. Just empty spaces where they had been. Panic began to ripple through the school, though no one wanted to admit the truth. Parents demanded answers, and the police questioned the administration, but nothing explained the pattern. And the faceless entity? It was becoming bolder. Sophomore students reported seeing a pale, faceless figure in the hallways at night, moving with unnatural speed. Hall monitors described lockers slamming shut on their own and lights flickering violently in response to movement. The most chilling accounts came from those who were alone. The figure would appear at the edge of vision, always just out of focus, staring silently, never moving its head. One evening, during after-school detention, a group of students tried to stay back to investigate the disappearances. They gathered in the library, armed with flashlights and courage, unaware that Lincoln High's reality was beginning to shift. As they whispered theories, the temperature dropped sharply. Breath visible in the air, the faint creak of lockers echoed through the halls. Suddenly, the lights went out. The library was plunged into darkness. Panic erupted. Flashlights flickered, illuminating glimpses of the faceless figure in corners, behind stacks of books, always watching. Then it moved. Faster than anyone could comprehend, it closed the distance, standing directly in front of them. A low, guttural whisper echoed from the figure. "You shouldn't be here." The students screamed and scattered. When the lights returned a moment later, one of them, Sarah, was gone. Her backpack remained on the floor, contents spilled, but she was gone as if she had been erased. The others fled, running through hallways that no longer looked familiar. Staircases led nowhere, doors opened to brick walls, and every turn seemed to bring them closer to the faceless figure rather than away from it. By the end of the week, the rumors had turned into terrorized truth. 5 students had disappeared without explanation. The entire school was on edge. Security cameras captured fleeting glimpses of the faceless figure. Distorted, shadowed, impossible to identify, moving through hallways where no human should have been able to pass. Wherever it went, the shadows deepened, lights flickered, and the air seemed to thrum with a malevolent intelligence. Lincoln High had stopped BBY mid-October. Lincoln High no longer resembled the school it once was. Teachers arrived in the morning only to find hallways rearranged overnight. Classrooms that existed yesterday had vanished. Staircases led to nowhere, doors opened into brick walls, and windows reflected hallways that shouldn't exist. It was as if the building had grown sentient and malevolent. The faceless figure had grown bolder. No longer content to lurk in shadows, it began to manipulate the very structure of the school. Students reported seeing it appear inside classrooms that were locked, outside gym doors that hadn't existed before, and even reflected in mirrors down impossible corridors. A group of seniors, Emily's friends, desperate to find her, decided to stay late after school. They armed themselves with flashlights, cameras, and a shaky sense of courage. They vowed to document whatever was happening, certain that proof would explain the disappearances. The library, the epicenter of the last encounter, had shifted entirely. Where there had once been shelves of books, there was now an endless expanse of lockers. The ceiling seemed impossibly high, the air thick and heavy, with a coldness that bit into the skin. Their flashlights revealed movement at the periphery of vision, shadows that weren't cast by anything physical. "Did you see that?" whispered Marcus, pointing to a locker that had just slammed shut by itself. Before anyone could answer, the lights flickered violently. The faceless figure materialized at the end of the hall. This time it wasn't just observing. It moved deliberately toward them, gliding across the floor without sound.